Hi, and thank you for joining me for this recording. In this lesson, we're going to go over Julius Caesar, and we're really going to discuss the historical figure, Julius Caesar, in preparation for the reading that you will do of the play by William Shakespeare. So in this lesson, we'll go over his early life, the positions he held, wars that he was involved in, and then ultimately his assassination. And we'll also look at the legacy he left behind. So, this is a quote from Lucan, and he says of Caesar Caesar had more than a mere name and military reputation. His energy could never rest, and his one disgrace was to conquer without war. He was alert and headstrong. His arms answered every summons of ambition or resentment. He never shrank from using the sword lightly. He followed up each success and snatched at the favor of fortune, overthrowing every obstacle on his path to supreme power and rejoicing to clear the way before him by destruction. A very wordy and flowery way of saying that Julius Caesar was most ambitious. All right, so the early years. Caesar was born to a not so well off patrician family in 100 BC in a plebeian neighborhood of Rome, and the plebeians are basically just ordinary citizens. After a civil war, Caesar was left penniless and almost lost his life while he was still just a teenager. He joined the army at age 18 and served for 4 years. And even though he had these humble beginnings, his rise to power really started at an early age. He was elected a senator at age 30. At age 34, he was put in charge of public entertainments, and he spent lavishly and won great popularity. Then he was elected to the Pontifex Maximus at age 36. This post was for life and brought power, wealth, and prestige, plus a big house in the Forum. So, this humble beginning guy started to really grow in terms of comfort and power. At age 39, he then became military governor in Spain, where he entered his reputation as a military general. Then he was elected consul, which was the highest office in Rome at age 40. So, this word right here, triumvirate, is something you'll want to get familiar with. It will appear in Shakespeare's play Julius Caesar, and basically it's just a power formed by three people, and that's where this prefix tri, which means three, comes into play. So get familiar with that word. But really, Caesar formed the first triumvirate with these two other folks we're going to hear about now. Wealth, popularity, military commands are all creating news and great opportunities for personal power for Caesar. And it's at this time that he joins with two other people to form the first triumvirate. And that was with Marcus Crassus, who was the richest man in Rome, and then Pompeius Magnus, the most successful general of the time. And then, of course, the third of that number was Caesar himself, who was an up and coming and really quite popular consul. So after his consulship, Caesar makes sure he's appointed governor of Illyricum, which is Italian Gaul and then Gaul across the Alps. This gives him the opportunity to command troops again and to conquer territory. This also gives him the opportunity for great wealth. Through his commentaries of the war published back in Rome, he gains even greater celebrity. So he was quite the writer and author, too. So Crassus dies in battle in Parthia. The Senate convinces Pompey to oppose Caesar rather than work with him. Caesar, after 8 years in Gaul, is ordered to surrender his armies and return to Rome to stand trial. So Caesar invades Italy with his legions. So here's where the conflict starts to begin. So the Senate puts Pompey and Caesar against each other, and rather than surrender, Caesar decides to carry on and make his own empire grand in his own name grand. So civil war begins. Pompey and the leading senators flee to Greece to ready their army, and Caesar easily takes Italy, Rome, and Spain in the meantime. So outnumbered 2-1, Caesar faces Pompey in Greece and actually crushes him. Pompey flees to Egypt, and this is where Caesar then fills in that vacuum, that void. Caesar was the first Roman to have his face put on a coin while he was still alive. This really goes to show how much he thought of himself. He really thought he was something special. The Romans believed only ancestors and gods could be pictured on coins, but Caesar was equating himself with gods and Eastern kings. So Caesar has himself appointed dictator for life. Caesar now rules alone, using friends, freedmen, and slaves to govern, completely ignoring the Senate. And the question now at this point is, was Caesar a king? He starts wearing an all purple toga, the garment of a triumphal general representing the god Jupiter. Was Caesar a god? Well, at least we know he thought of himself as such. So his arrogance and his power were growing at the same time. Enter Cleopatra onto the stage. Cleopatra, a famous name that I'm sure you probably have heard of, became Queen of Egypt at the age of 17. She was the joint ruler of Egypt with her brother Ptolemy XII. Egyptian custom meant that she had to actually marry him. Ptolemy was aged 12 at the time, and he died when he was only 18 years old. Ptolemy and Cleopatra did not get along. Ptolemy's advisors drove Cleopatra out into the desert so Ptolemy could rule alone. Pompey fled to Egypt after being defeated by Julius Caesar, and this is where the connection with Rome and Egypt really starts to take place. Ptolemy had Pompey beheaded and presented his head to Julius Caesar. Ptolemy probably thought he was doing something great to form this union with Rome and Caesar, but he made a mistake. It was a big miscalculation on Ptolemy's part. Pompey was still consul of Rome, and he was actually Julius Caesar's son-in-law too. So Julius Caesar actually demanded that Pompey's assassins be handed over to him. Well, Ptolemy, of course, refused this, and then Julius Caesar fought against Ptolemy's army. Ptolemy, weighted by his armor of gold, was actually drowned in the river Nile due to the weight of what he was wearing. So then enters a new leader. Cleopatra's third brother, Ptolemy XIV, becomes joint ruler. So Julius Caesar had Cleopatra restored to the throne of Egypt using his military might. Cleopatra and Caesar unite. Cleopatra's son, Caesarion, was probably Caesar's son. She and Caesarion lived in Rome with Julius. However, Caesar refused to recognize Caesarion as his heir. Julius Caesar created the Julian Forum, named after himself, and the forum was needed because the old forum had become too small to deal with the amount of people. That Brutus actually had issued, and they were to commemorate Caesar's assassination because Brutus had actually hoped he and the other conspirators would be seen as heroes liberating the Republic from a tyrant, but they didn't understand how much the people actually loved Caesar. So, after this assassination, Caesar's body is cremated in a massive public demonstration in the Forum. But Caesar's support is strong. A temple is built to divine Julius in that spot, and the conspirators actually are forced to flee. And then civil war breaks out again, this time with Caesar's right-hand man, Mark Antony, and his heir Octavian conquering the armies of Brutus, Cassius, and the senators. And without spoiling too much, this is going to be one of my favorite scenes in Julius Caesar, as written by William Shakespeare, the moving speech that Mark Antony gives after Caesar's death. So pay special attention to that. Caesar definitely left a legacy. He provided a blueprint for rising to absolute power in Rome, and that's actually a blueprint both Octavian and Antony followed. His name, Caesar's name, became one of the titles for the Roman emperors, and also the more modern Tsar and Kaiser derive from his name too. Caesar also began the practice of granting Roman citizenship to conquered peoples. This helped to prolong the expansion and maintenance of the Roman Empire. His commentaries are one of the great pieces of Latin literature. He inspired one of Shakespeare's most celebrated plays, the one that you're about to read, and his reform of the calendar has been changed very little over the past 2 millennia. And in fact, the month of July is named for him. So, in this brief historical introduction to the historical figure of Julius Caesar, we learned about his early life, the positions he held, the wars he was involved in, his assassination, and ultimately his legacy. So now you'll embark on the play, and I certainly hope you enjoy it. Please do reach out if you have any questions, comments, or concerns.